Hello, ladies and gentlemen, fellow coders. Welcome to this next lesson in the FreshVotes series. I've done this intro many times. If you don't know what you're watching right now, then I don't know how to help you. You need to go back to previous videos and have a look. So in this lesson, we are going to be diving into the front end and building out our feature.html page and linking it up such that we'll be able to see the feature and edit it once it's been created. But I guess more importantly, first we need to have some sort of way for a user to land on a product page and then create a feature. So really, there's another page here, sort of like a product view, only it's a view for the user, not for the product owner. So that's actually sort of the first step here before we go forward. So just to visually give you an idea of what I'm talking about and rambling on about, let me go ahead and log in. So as we've seen many times, there is a product view, right? This is the product view. We go to products/product ID. We can go and we can edit the name of the product, and we can say whether or not the product is published. But really, there should be some sort of page that perhaps lists all the products that are hosted on FreshVotes, potentially. That's a design choice that I need to decide on. I think that it's almost like a marketplace of products, and you can suggest features. But I don't know if I want to get that in depth right now. I don't even know if that really makes a lot of sense to do. But really what we need here is a user view, so a user who does not own the product. This is just a user who uses said product, for example, product number 1. And we want to see a view where we can obviously click a button to submit a feature request. So what should that look like? What URL endpoint should that be? There's two ways to think about it. One way is it would be the same URL, potentially, but this page would look different depending on if you are the product owner or if you're just some random user who landed on the page, right? You can render a view in two different ways if you like to. That's not a terrible idea, but having two views, essentially two ways to look at the same page, so having two views in one HTML page, I'm just not a big fan of it myself. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it. I'm not a big fan. I would prefer a different URL. So how about we do this? How about instead of having this cryptic ID, which means nothing to a human, we create another endpoint, which is maybe products / the name of the product. Okay, so there's two impacts that we'll make if we choose that design. The first is the URL encoding. So if there's a space in the product, like we have here, product, and then we have a space, and then number 1, having a space in a URL, it causes problems. You would then need to encode the product, the URL or the product name in the URL. Even number signs, I think, might cause issues. But anyway, you need to encode it, right? So you would have to take this, and if you have like a URL encoder, you can see what the encoded version of this URL would be. If I just go to some random encoder and say encode, that's what the URL would be. Not the prettiest thing in the world, but that's what it would render to for product number 1. So I think that at least gives somewhat of a friendly URL for a user to go to, at least somewhat memorable. And I think I don't think I mind that. So we're substituting out a physical ID, a number, which doesn't mean anything to someone, with an actual product name, if you will, and that will be the URL. So I think I'm okay with that. So that therefore defines the view that we are going to be using. So and that'll be a separate page, right? So we'll create a separate template for that. And we'll call that the, product user view.html or something like that, right? That's not the greatest name in the world, but hey, I don't want to get bogged down with naming conventions. So, and the title here, we could actually pull from the model, right? We can actually have the name of the product be populated in here, potentially, but I'll do that in a moment. Same with this, right? The product name here, and then we can have a form action where we actually submit. We actually have a button, so I'm going to delete this stuff here. I'm going to leave the CSRF stuff, and I'm going to change this Save Product button to be create feature request or something like that, right? Because that's sort of the point of this page, is to be able to create a feature request. Okay, so now we also need to, in the product controller, create our endpoint, right? We have a get mapping for the product/product ID, but now we need to have a get mapping for product/product name, essentially, okay? So product name. Cool. So we'll see if this works. I think it should, because it'll be two different data types, but we might still we might need to tweak it in some way, shape, or form. But we'll see. We'll get there. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. We'll say product user view is essentially what we're building out here. The path variable is going to be a string product name. And we need to remember that it's encoded, right? So we'll need to decode this product name. Oh, right. So way back at the beginning of the video, I said there's two important things. One is the URL will need to be encoded. The second is, if we're grabbing products by product name, that means that the product name has to be unique. Okay, so that might have, we might need to change our database structure a little bit, but we'll get there soon. So first things first is we need to be able to load a product based on the name that we are given, right? So that's also a design thing. Well, although it's not too difficult to do, we go into our product repository and we, instead of saying find by ID, find by user, we just say find by, I think it's called name. So if we go into product, a product has a name. Yeah, so find by name, right? And this is fine. We can do this with, maybe we'll make an optional product, because if you might be looking for a name that doesn't exist in the database. So find by name, and we can say find by name like this and just leave it as is and walk away, because this is a standard naming convention that we're using based on Spring Data JPA, right? We're leveraging Spring Data, another Spring product. And when we say find by as a prefix in a method name here within a repository, when we use it as a prefix, it triggers Spring Data to say, hey, what comes after this is actually a meaningful name. It actually should match a property inside of the entity that the repository is based off of. So this repository is based off of the product entity, and the product entity has a name property, or instance variable, another word for that. So because name matches name here, except for the casing, you need to use camel case, so it knows to make it a lowercase n over here. But find by name, because name exists over here, it knows to find by this. So this is going to create a SQL statement. This will create a SQL statement, and essentially it creates a select star from product where name equals the name that we're passing in. Essentially, this is more or less what it will generate. Okay, now it doesn't generate select star. It's more specific with the columns that it chooses. But I'll say this will roughly create this SQL statement. Select star from product where name equals name, right? So cool. That's essentially what that will do. Without having to write any SQL, it'll do it. It'll do that for us. So now we can say product repo dot find by name, and we pass in the product name that's being passed in via the user, copy paste the URL or whatever, right? So it's being passed in. Now remember, I said two things. One is it's encoded, needs to be encoded. Two, it needs to be unique. The first thing is important now, because the product name in the database is not going to be encoded. At least I don't imagine it would be. So, but maybe it should. We'll see. We'll see what bugs appear as we're going through. So let's assume that, this product is encoded. This product name is encoded because it's coming from a URL, so it better be encoded, otherwise it won't work. So it will be encoded, but let's assume that the name in the database is not encoded, which means we need to decode this before we find by it. Okay? So first, let's assume that product name is not null, right? Because if it is null, then we don't want to be doing anything really. And and we can then say decode. So I forget URI in URL encoder. Yeah. So there's two types of encoders. I think Java.net encoder is what I want. So URL encoder dot, no, that's encode only. So let me go back. I did an auto import. Let me remove this import at the top that it did, the URL encoder, so that I can get my choices back again and hover over this and say maybe from Apache and see if this has a decode. No, it doesn't. So I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to decode in Java right now. So let's see how to decode a URL in Java, or string really is what we're decoding, a string. How do you do, yeah. Oh, look, I've even upvoted something. Java.net URL, oh, decoder. Okay, .decode. So there's URL encoder and URL decoder. They're two separate objects. So URL decoder from Java.net .decode. And the string we want to decode is product name, and the product name. And the encoding process we use is probably just like UTF-8 or something. Yeah, standard char sets.utf8. Standard char sets.utf8 .name, I think is what it wanted. Cool. And then what it's underlined in red probably because there's a possibility for errors decoding. So we'll do it in a try catch. Do I have a log? No, I don't. I should talk about logs too here. Why not? Let's create a log. You can bring a log in, like a log file or a logging system, so that you can keep track of logging errors and whatnot. There's a class called logger. So logger is the type, and I'll make this private because it should only be scoped to this class for this logger. They don't need to be public or anything. But logger is a type. This is the variable name, equals logger factory dot get logger. Okay, and then the name of the class is just product controller. That's what we're logging. We're logging stuff inside of the product controller, and this comes from SLF4J. That's the one we want. Okay, so SLF4J is simple logging. It allows us to log very easily. So now we can take this log variable that we've declared and say log an error, and we can have a message. So there was an error decoding a product URL, and you put a comma and you can pass in the exception. So this exception is E is what it's called. So fine, we'll pass in E. So now that's just a simple way to log something to the system, the console, or the log file, or whatever it is. So SLF4J takes care of that along with Spring Boot. It's all set with sensible defaults. It's lovely. So decoder has to be in a try-catch, and the decoder returns a string, a decoded string, right? So a decoded product name. So now let's move this product repo find by name. Let's move it up into our try-catch, and let's find by that decoded product name. Okay, that should hopefully return a product. It's going to return an optional product, so we'll do product OPT. That's the naming convention I use for optional variables. And if that product OPT is present, then great. We just searched and found a product in our database. So now we can take that product and we can do something with it. In other words, we can return to the view. So essentially, to return to the view, we need to put it on the model. Okay, so let's bring in a model here. And then we can say model.put product product opt.get. Okay, because product opt is the optional wrapper around it. You'd say .get to actually get the value inside of the optional wrapper. Cool, so that'll put that on the model, and then we can return down here the view that we want to return, which is, what was it called? Product user view, product user view. Okay, so now with this view, we can say, where was product user view? Now we can, for the title, we have a product now on the model. It's called, what do we call it? Just product is what we called it. So now we can say th text product dot name, right? Yeah, we'll just say product.name. And the same thing here. th text is the product.name. Cool. So now when we say create feature request, we can actually send a have a post to the appropriate endpoint, right? So now we're tying into the previous video, which is where we had created inside the was it the feature controller? Where was it? Feature controller. This URL. So we want to post to this URL to create a feature request. So the URL is product/product ID/features. Okay. So let's do that. So for this view, the action is going to be /products/the product ID, right? So what is the product ID? Well, we're going to have to augment this form action to be a th action, okay? And then we're going to use our URL building syntax, like so. Oops. This is for a Timeleaf has this as the URL building syntax, and I believe it's curly brackets. Is it curly brackets or round brackets? I think it's curly brackets. Again, it's been a while, ladies and gentlemen. Product ID, call it whatever you like, as long as you're consistent. I'll call it product ID /features is where we want to post to. But then, for now, that we're building this URL, it doesn't know what a product ID is in these curly brackets, so we need to tell it what it is, and we do that by using the following syntax. At the end of the URL, we have round brackets. We specify the name of the variable that we declared over here, because that's essentially what's happening. We're declaring a variable. And then we say that variable equals. Then we use Spring expression language to put in the resolved, the value, what it should be. And the value comes from the product that we already have on the model. So we can say product.id. Okay, so that's how we tell it how to build that URL out. Not the most sexy, not the most intuitive of naming styles here. I get it. I know it's confusing. It's one of those things you just have to get used to. Okay. I wish there was an easy way to remember all that stuff, but yeah, there you have it. So hopefully this will work. We'll see. So this form should post to this resolved endpoint. Should be the proper endpoint. We'll see if it works or not. So yeah, when we click on this button, since it's inside of this form, hopefully, if all goes well, when we click on the button, everything will just work. So that's always the end goal with this stuff, isn't it? So let's reboot the server. Let's go back in and let's type in, what was the decoded URL decoder? Encoder decoder. So product number 1 was the name of our product. If we encode it, here's the encoded thing. So now if we go to products/this, hopefully this will work. So let's put a breakpoint inside of our product controller inside of this method. And actually, let me stop the server and reboot it in debug mode. And hopefully, if all goes well, this will resolve to the endpoint that we've put a breakpoint in. Hopefully. Okay, so it's asking us to log in, which I guess makes sense because we're forcing it to do that with this particular URL structure. Again, that's a design choice that we're going to have to make. I think as a user, you shouldn't have to log in yet. You should be able to view. Anyway, we'll get into that kind of thing in the next video. But anyway, once I log in, here's the error. So ambiguous handler methods mapped for blah, right? So I guess the fact that remember I said I think there might be a conflict between this URL and this URL. I guess it's not happy about that. It's ambiguous. It doesn't know which of the two to choose, which is it's too bad because it doesn't know that this is a long versus a string, right? They all come in a string, so it doesn't know how to handle it. So okay, so we're gonna have to use a different endpoint here in terms of how to make. This is where some people do something like this. They'll do like P/product name, right? They'll just shorten it just to make it different. Fair enough. Let's just do that for now. /P/product name. And then over here, instead of doing /products, we can do /P. Again, that's not the convention. That's just what I've seen some people do before. Right, then we need to log in. And then it resolves to this method. So you see, that was causing a problem. It didn't know which of the two to go to. So product name comes in. Oh, look, it's already decoded. Interesting. So that's, I didn't realize it did that. So now this decoding logic is going to mess stuff up, right? So it's going to try to decode the product name, and, well, I guess there's nothing to decode, so I guess it remains the same. Anyway, that's kind of redundant though, so I'll need to probably take that out. And then we do the find by name, so let's see what our, oops, I almost stopped the server. We'll see what the SQL is that it resolves to. Here's a SQL. Does it find a product by that name? Yes, it does. Fantastic, which we expected, and therefore it puts it on the model and should put it on the view, on the model, and return the view. So now the view is here. There you go. Product number 1 is the name. The title is product number 1, and then we have create feature request. So let's have a peek at the code for create feature request in the form. Oops, I need to get rid of that and let it go through the breakpoint. So let's see here, form logout. So look at this, form action /products/1/features, and it'll be a post. So that worked. Our fancy URL structure worked. So when I say create feature request, it's actually going to go and try to, it's going to execute our code in the back end. Hopefully it did execute our code in the back end. Looks like it did, but it didn't save anything. So something did go wrong there. I guess we don't have enough time to look into that in this video, but let's just make sure that it actually went to this endpoint. Let me put a breakpoint here and start in debug mode. And just make sure that it actually hit this create feature method. Okay. So when we actually clicked on, let me go back and log in. When we click on this button, no, so it did not hit that endpoint. So there's an issue with products1/features. Products1 post mapping. So it should have hit that post because the form, this form, it is a form and it's doing a post, right? Form action method post. CSRF button. So when we click that button, it should post to the products/1/features, which products/1/features post mapping. Unless I need to put a slash here. I don't feel like I have to, but hey, let's just do that real quick. And then if this doesn't work, then we can leave the debugging to the next video. Because again, I'm sorry, I've gone long. I try my best, I really do, but there's so much to talk about. So let's see if this makes any difference. No, still 404. Okay, so we'll leave this to debugging to the next video. We'll dive into why that didn't work. And if we have time, we will also dive into the database part and making sure that we ensure that the product name is unique now that we're using this endpoint using the product name here. So we have to make sure the product name is unique. Otherwise, it's going to return more than one product, and that's going to be a problem. Okay, cool. So looking forward to see you guys in the next episode. Thanks so much for joining. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not, then just keep on watching and enjoying the series. So, till next time, ladies and gentlemen, happy coding. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.